Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. I debated on if I wanted to do a video today. I do them every Tuesday and Thursday, and I was just wondering about it being Thanksgiving and if it'd be worth even messing with. But I want to keep the flow going. So, as I was talking about in the last video, I laid down and I started thinking about some good memories of my grandmother. Now, it was rare that she would keep me, my brother Jason, and my sister Susan, all three at the same time. We were a handful of excessive energy. And I can remember one of the visits in particular. We were bouncing off the furniture, body slamming each other on that brown shag carpet, and then crying while holding our carpet burns. I guess she'd had enough. And so she was like, "All right, y'all better get your asses on that sofa right now and be still. There's a shit monster in the wood box. And if you get off that sofa, it will chew your legs off." I mean, we were young kids. So we get up there and we're all just sitting next to each other, trying not to giggle, trying to be quiet. Now, for y'all who don't know what a wood box is, let me explain. Back when I was younger and even before that, a lot of people didn't have central heat and air units. And so their main source of heat was this big wood burning stove. It sat in their living room. And to the right of the wood burning stove were some bookcases, and then underneath that was a cabinet door that you could open, and the wood was stacked in. And on the outside of the house was a door on the carport where you could slide the wood in to that wood box area that went inside of the house. So in the winter evenings when Granddad would get home from work, before he came inside, he would fill that wood box up. Well, we were laughing at the fact that Grandmom had come up with the name Shit Monster. And I tried to push my brother in the floor, off the sofa, just to see if this was really going to be a thing. Well, with all the giggling still going on, we didn't hear my granddad pulling up from work. And so when he took the wood and slid it into the wood box, it hit the cabinet door. And it made a slam sound like something was about to come in through the house. And we all just started screaming, "Oh my God, it's the shit monster." And I just remember looking at my grandmother out of the corner of my eye in the living room, and she was just kind of cutting her eyes and laughing at us, that had happened. And so those were, yeah, those were some really interesting stories that she would tell us. When the door opened to my cell, I come out of my memory, and a cellmate was entering the cell to join me. And she was just a kid in my eyes. She was a white girl with shoulder-length brown hair. And I said, "Hey, how are you?" And she said, "Hi, I'm Carla." And she said, "I just want to get high." She said, "I love using meth, but my boyfriend is clean. And he gets mad at me for using because he stopped. And I just want him to get high with me and have fun." And when he told me no, he didn't want to get high with me, she said, I got mad and started drinking. And she said, the next thing I know, the cops are bringing me in here. And I said, "Well, how old are you?" And I just knew by looking at her that she had to be younger than my 26-year-old son. And she said, "I'm 22. And I said, "You're so young." She said, "Yeah, I know, but I can't put the meth down." And I just wanted to cry for her. And she was just so skinny and so sad, looking. But by looking at her, you never would have thought this is somebody on meth. I mean, she was beautiful. She was real thin. Her hair was fixed nice. I mean, you just never would have thought by looking at her that she was a druggie. And at that very moment, despite my situation, I knew God needed me to be a spirit of light in there. And not just with her, but with other women. And I knew that there were something in there that they could teach me as well. And so I just started asking her some questions and to just let her know that I cared about what she was going through. And I said, "Did you enjoy high school?" And before she could even give me an answer, I knew she was going to tell me how boring it was. And I said, "Well, I said, creative minds have to be creative or they go into dark places." And I said, then the person will start using drugs to deal with the depression and the anxiety because they're not expressing themselves. And she said, "I did not do good in school." She said, "I hated school." And I said, "Oh, okay. Are you creative?" I said, "You like writing or doing art?" And she smiled for the first time since she'd walked in there. And I watched her energy shift as she told me how much she loved to paint. And I said, "Well, why don't you pick up the paint and put down the drugs?" I said, "You're creative." And I said, "You can use your art to express your emotions." She looked down at her crossed legs and she tugged on that white blanket that was resting on her feet, and she began to talk about her emotions. And she said, "That's the problem." She said, "When I start to paint," she said, "it brings up emotions and then I can't deal with them." And she said, "But I do miss doing the work." She said, "Maybe when I get out of here, I need to start working a job and using painting instead of drugs." Again, I was doing good with another person in that cell with me because I felt like I could be purposeful, I could have conversation, I could have connection. And we were on lockdown that whole day. And luckily she was in there and I had somebody that I could talk to. And by the end of that day, Carla was released. And I did not want that isolation again. That was the one thing I hated about being in jail, was that I laid there alone for hours with no ways to use, my creativity and, any of my gifts. I mean, all I had to do was just lay there. So anyway, I needed to write and I needed to change my thoughts, and I would catch myself and then I said, "Okay, let's write. And they were out of stationery the last time I had gotten to go into the day room, so I grabbed a couple of pieces of paper that were like medical request forms, and I dated it at the top of the paper, 2/24/20. So I'd been in there, this was 5 days. And I tried to write myself a faithful message. And I said, this is what I wrote: "Lord, your promises is that in a little while, your help is coming right away. And I cannot see what you are doing, but this is called faith. You have greater powers for bigger miracles than my human mind can contain." And then I wrote Matthew 7:7. "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will open for you. For everyone who asks receives, and for the one who seeks finds, and for the one who knocks the door will open." Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and heal every disease and sickness. "As you go, proclaim the message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received and freely you give." And I just kept my mind on these verses just as Jesus was talking to me in a serious tone. I knew that my heart had been bitter and hard for years, and I'd turned my back on Jesus and filled my hands full of money, material things, bad relationships, unforgiveness. And then there was the click, click, click. And I ran as fast as I could down those stairs in my orange flip-flops. And I was holding a piece of folded paper that I had written the phone numbers on. The other women were moving slow. I mean, and it was early in the morning, and they were on all these sedatives for drug withdrawal, so they were sleeping, and I needed a phone bad. I had been in there for 24 hours without coming out, even to eat. I mean, they just kind of slid the food through the door. So the only contact I had had in 24 hours were maybe like those 8 hours with that girl, Carla, who had came in my cell. So my dad decided to give my sister his credit card number so that she could accept my collect calls. And I sit there with that phone in my hand making the collect calls. I took off my glasses and I dried the tears that had covered the lenses so I could see. And I looked over to the right, the girl next to me on the phone, and they're always like, "Who you on the phone with? Who you talking to? Where they from?" And I just wanted to talk in private, but there was no way to talk in private. And there were inmates all around me listening, and the whole phone call and the jail's being recorded, and you don't know if you say one little thing on there, if they're gonna, a detective's gonna get that and then use it against you. I mean, it's just so much control. And anyway, I opened up my piece of paper and I looked down at my dad's number. And I was just sitting there going through that whole process of getting my dad on the phone. And I was so tired of putting in my booking number to make the call, because it would take between 4 and 5 minutes for whoever you were calling to collect to be able to connect to. So anyway, I said, "Hey, Dad." He said, "Hey." He said, "How's it going?" He said, "Have you talked to your sister?" And I just said, "It's scary in here, Dad." I said, "It's nasty. It's horrible." I said, "I can't even talk about it without getting upset." And I said, "I'll call Susan when I hang up." I said, "I just wanted to catch you." And he said, "It won't be much longer." He said, "They can't keep you in there forever." And he told me that he had talked to my attorney and that the DA's office was already making arrangements to get me back to Georgia. Because one of the things that my dad had tried to ask my attorney about doing was just letting me fly myself back to Georgia and turn myself in, since I didn't know that I had a warrant when I crossed back over into the United States. And I had no idea how they were going to get me back. And so I was like, "Well, do you think they'll fly me home?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I think so. And then when you get back to Georgia, don't worry about it. I'll be there to bond you out." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'll call you tomorrow." I said, "As soon as they let me out of the cell." And I said, "The waiver's already been signed, so Rome should have, be getting the waiver." And he said, "We'll try to have a good night in there." And he said, "I'll talk to you soon." He said, "Call your sister." And I said, "Okay, Dad, good night. I love you." And I knew Susan's number by heart, so I didn't have to look at a piece of paper with her number on it. But I did use my pencil and I doodled some flowers and hearts out of nervousness while waiting on her to answer the call. I said, "Hey, how are you?" I said, "I hate this, Susan." I said, "I want somebody to get me the fuck out of here now." And she said, "Well, our mom's asked about you." She said, "I guess I could call her on three-way." And she said she's asked her mom to drop the charges, and she's said no. And so she called my mom on three-way, and it just wasn't good. She did say, "Britt, don't worry. We're going to get you out of there." And, she said it was the ex-girlfriend that started all this, which I knew it. And I knew that there was somebody else that had really pushed my grandmother into believing a story like that. It just wasn't just her and her ideas. She had the dementia, and then she had somebody that was calling her every freaking day and making up these stories and lies and that I had stole, and then she had my mom believing it, and so she was kind of pushing into it too. So there was more than that, and I know I still had to kind of be careful about what I say. I mean, I just do. Anyway, so I could just feel the anger on the phone with them, and it was just like my heart was being, pounded by a jackhammer. And I hated everyone who had been playing a part and put me in there. And I mean, I was going back and forth with the emotions. And I said, listen, I'm going to have to let y'all go. And my sister said, I love you, Britt. And I said, I love you too. And I hung up and I walked through the day room, and there was this black lady standing there, and she said, do you believe in Jesus? I said, yeah, I do. I said, I'm not much on talking to him. And I said, not at least not until I've been locked up in this cell. And I had a chaplain visit me yesterday morning. She said, well, you need to get a Bible. She said, bring over one of those request forms and sit down at this jail stationary area, and I'll help you fill it out. So we filled out this request form, and she showed me where to go put it in a mail slot by the door. And I was just hoping it wouldn't take me long to get a copy. I mean, at that point, I would have probably read anything. So I just said, ma'am, I really appreciate you. And I wasn't sure how I was going to get my Bible. And she said, you read it every day. And she said, it'll strengthen you. So it was about 10 o'clock, and the deputies started yelling for us to get back in our cells. After getting back in my cell, I fell asleep, and I had this dream, and it was just like a vision of me being on a lawnmower at my dad and my stepmom's on their property. And I thought, wow, is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Was I supposed to be helping them? And then I just thought more about divine intervention that was going on in my life. And then I had another memory about when I was in Mexico on the writings retreat, and we were in a bar listening to this Hispanic woman sing songs in English. And as soon as she got up there and started singing, the first song was Georgia. Georgia on my mind. And of course my mouth fell open. That woman didn't know I was from Georgia. I mean, everybody around me knew that I was from Georgia, but she didn't. And I just, even then, like, to think back at it now, it was some type of synchronicity that's where I was supposed to be back at, that's where I was supposed to be going to, or that's where I'd be headed. And then I was like, are these messages from God? And was I listening? Was I paying attention? And so after really sitting there reflecting on all these synchronicities and trying to piece everything together, and I had come to terms with the fact that this is where I was supposed to be in that very moment. And that the Spirit had led me up to this place. And that I had to trust that everything was going to be okay and everything was in divine order. And that was hard, because it was so hard to think about something positive when I was sitting in those kind of conditions and around all the inhumanity. I mean, it was just very, very hard to sit in there and be positive while being hungry, while being thirsty, while being dirty, while sleeping in filth, while being yelled at, screamed at, isolated, trapped, not having anybody in that town or anywhere. I mean, my closest family was 3,000 miles away, or friends. So it was hard to sit there and say, okay, this is divine. This is where Spirit has me right now. So let's just see where this goes.